Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how I made a scythe prop to go along with the Grim Reaper or Angel of Death costume. Mine ended up being 9.5 feet tall and the blade was about 3.5 to 4 feet long. I just started by using a scrap piece of 1/2 inch plywood and used a pencil to draw the pattern I wanted for the blade. You could see it took me a few tries before I was finally happy with the look that I wanted. Just make sure to leave the blade's tang long enough so that it can be attached to the shaft. Once you're happy with the shape of the blade, cut it out with a bandsaw or a jigsaw. Make sure you read and understand all the manuals that came with your power tools, and don't forget to wear your safety glasses. Next, use a power sander to get the blade as absolutely smooth as possible. After all, we want it to look like metal, right? Start with a coarse 120 grit sandpaper and work your way down to 220 and then even finer if you want. Just be careful not to sand through the top layer of the plywood. While you have the sander handy, sand a bevel to give the appearance of a blade's edge. Now, there's no need to make it sharp, this is just a prop. If you don't have a power sander, borrow one from someone. This could be done by hand, but your arms and shoulders will be pretty sore the next day. Go to your local lumberyard and select the most bowed 2x2 you can find. Now, they'll be happy to sell it to you. In fact, they might even sell it cheap, so be sure to ask for a discount. You can make your scythe as long as you want. Where I live, I couldn't find any 2x2s longer than 8 foot. And since our Grim Reaper actor will be 8 feet tall on stilts, I had to splice the 2x2 with another one to extend it an additional 1.5 feet. I hope you didn't put the sander away, because now you're going to need it to smooth out the entire shaft. And while you're at it, round all the edges to give it more of a round appearance. We don't exactly want this to look like a square piece of lumber when it's finished. Next, measure and mark out where you want the blade to penetrate the shaft. Then drill small pilot holes on each end and make sure they're centered. Then use a 1/2 inch bit, or a bit the same size as your blade width, to drill out the pilot holes. If you have access to a drill press, that would be ideal for this because it can be difficult to drill the holes straight through the center using only a hand drill. Use a jigsaw, scroll saw, coping saw, or whatever works to safely remove the material between the two holes. Then use a small chisel and rasp to square it up. Test fit the blade into the shaft and remove material as necessary until you get a good, snug fit. Now it's time for the fun part. Give the blade a few good coats of brown or rust-colored primer. Wait for it to dry, then flip it over and repeat on the other side. Give the primer at least an hour to dry, and then spray a couple coats of silver paint. Once the paint is dry, mix a small amount of silver acrylic craft paint with a drop of black, and dry brush streaks perpendicular to the edge of the blade. This will give the blade more depth and make it look like it's been used. Next, paint the beveled edge with the silver acrylic paint for added realism. You can even mix in a little white to make it stand out. Now, this is optional, but I wanted to give my blade an appearance that it's beginning to rust. So all I did was take a blunt metal tool, like the edge of a pair of pliers or a wrench, and carefully scraped away some of the silver paint to reveal the brown primer underneath. Now, don't get too carried away doing this. As Bob Ross would say, just a few hints that there's some happy little rust beginning to form. Also, it's best to do this the same day you spray the silver paint. Otherwise, the silver will harden and be much more difficult to scrape off. Now, I spray painted the entire shaft a light tan color to give it a natural look. Once dry, I then brushed watered down black acrylic craft paint all over the entire surface and wiped away the excess with a paper towel. The realism this step adds is just nothing short of amazing. Just make sure you put a drop cloth or plastic down to protect your floor. After all the paint is dried, insert the tang of the blade into the shaft. You may need to later touch up some of the paint on the blade depending on how snug the fit is. Pre-drill a couple holes and fasten with screws to hold everything together. Now, I wrapped a natural looking synthetic rope around the joint between the blade and the shaft. This rope serves to hide the screw heads and at the same time gives the prop kind of an old world appearance. I then used a torch to melt the end of the rope to itself to hold it into place. The finished prop measures about 9.5 feet tall, and here it is standing on end inside my garage with a 10-foot ceiling. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please leave a comment and let me know what you think. That's all for now. Happy haunting.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.